Jesus, in his one recorded sermon, he probably preached more, but we have him recorded in Matthew 5-7. It's called the Sermon on the Mount. And so Jesus talks right smack dab in the middle of the Sermon on the Mount. He talks about stress and how to manage your stress and what to do when you're stressed. And he says in verse 25, he says, I tell you not to worry about everyday life. Jesus understood the tendency of human beings to get so caught up in what's happening right now that you're overwhelmed. And so he said, like day in and day out, sometimes there are things that feel so big because they're important, urgent, they're right in your face, and it feels like it's the big one. And so he says, don't worry about everyday life, whether you'll have enough food and drink or enough clothing to wear. Isn't life more than food and your body more than clothing? Now here's what he does. He does the fingerprint thing. He points us to the animal kingdom. He said, when you're feeling like your present trouble is like it's like the weight of the world is on you, he said, here's what you do. Verse 26, look at the birds. They don't plant or harvest or store food in barns, for your heavenly Father feeds them. And aren't you more valuable to him than they are? Can all of your worries add a single moment to your life? Is a rhetorical question. The obvious answer is no. If anything, your worry is gonna take years off your life or lower the quality of life in the years you do have. And so he says, look at the birds. Now this is interesting because we think about looking at the birds. All right, Jesus is pointing us to these animals that are instinctive creatures, that God has created them to do the thing they need to do to get the thing they need to get, right? So birds, only baby birds do this when they're hungry. Like that's what baby birds do. You know, they don't work. They just, in fact, you know, baby birds, we all know what happens. Mama's got to mature those guys, and they kicks them right out of the nest, right? And they're like, oh, okay. Otherwise, they'd just be in the nest. They'd just be posted up in the nest, right? On mom and dad's insurance for the rest of their life. He said, no, when you become a grown-up bird, you become a hunter, and you're hunting, and when you see a worm, you go down and get the worm. I put that instinct in you. I put that ability in you. You're not going to spend the rest of your life like it. I will provide the worm. Now, you hunt and do what I've created you to do and trust that there will be plenty of worms. I got worms on worms on worms, man. I got worms you don't know about. I got big fat worms. I got inch worms. I got skinny little tiny worms. I got snacks. I got main courses and dessert worms. But you got to get out there and flap your wings, and you got to look. And when you see it, you got to get down there and rip that thing out of the ground. I'm going to provide the worms, but I provided you with the instinct to hunt. And notice what Jesus says as he's talking about the birds, and he said, look at these birds. They're not stressed out. They're out there singing. You're stressed out. They're not stressed out. And he said, why? Because their instinct is to live according to how they've been created by God and to understand that the worm will be there when it's time. I mean, think about how much of your stress, ask yourself this honest question, how much of your stress is related to a situation that could cost you some excess, right? Jesus, when he talks about stress, he said, don't worry about what you're gonna eat, drink, and wear. Don't worry that you're gonna starve and be naked. I will take care of your needs. You will be taken care of. I put the instincts in you, and I'm gonna provide the worm, but you're gonna have to go rip it out of the ground. But I've given you what you need to take care of your needs. And you know, we live in a world where people are under tremendous stress because they're stressing about excess. What if I lose my job and I got to downgrade? Then you got to downgrade. We're not talking about food, water, and clothing. He's like, look at the birds. Birds aren't worried about a 3-car garage, a 2-car garage, a 1-car garage. So you lose your granite countertop and you got to downsize it. All right, I don't mean to make light, you know what I'm saying, but I mean to make light. Like we lose years on our lives. We can't sleep at night. We wake up with knots in our stomach. We end up in anxiety, and we got to take, all kinds of, try to figure out solutions based on, like, we are so stressed out about what? Excess? We're on excess? Like, come on, think your way through it. Like step back and say, okay, so what? if I lose this job and I can't get another one quick enough, or I can't get one that pays the one, this miserable job does the one I've just fantasized every day about quitting, but I'm in it because it pays the bills and I don't want to get my car repossessed. So what if I do and I quit the job, or I try to get another one, I can't get another one, and they repossess my car? Well, then you'll get another car. You get a cheaper car. Well, what if I can't afford a cheaper car? Then you carpool. What if nobody will carpool with me? Then you Uber. What if I can't afford an Uber? Then you get a bus pass. What if the bus doesn't go anywhere near my house? Then you get a bicycle. What if the bicycle gets a flat tire? Then you get a skateboard. What if the skateboard breaks? Then you get a roller skate. What if the roller skates, what if the shoestring breaks and I can't afford one? Then you'll jog. What if I get tired? Then you'll walk. What if I get a cramp in my calf? Well, then you just keep walking. What if I tear a hamstring? Well, then you'll get some crutches. What if the crutches break? Then you'll sit in a wheelchair and you'll do one of these things. What if my arm breaks? Then you'll use your head to get a little momentum. What if I catch a neck cramp? Then God will send wind so that you can get to work. But there's gonna be a worm in the ground when you get there. He said, look at the birds. Are you stressed out about excess? He said, I'm gonna provide your food. I'm gonna provide your drink. I'm gonna make sure you're not naked. You're gonna have your basics taken care of. Look at the birds right there. Because they know that the worm's gonna be there. They know what to stress out, what not to stress out about. And you're coming out of a meeting in knots. He said, walk outside, look at those birds. Then he goes from the animal kingdom to the plant kingdom. He says, don't worry about clothing. Look at the lilies of the field and how they grow. They don't work and make their own clothing. Now notice what he says here. He says the bird is designed to hunt. The lily doesn't hunt, but what does it do? It's perfectly designed to be able to do the work it needs to do. It takes in the water. We know the process of photosynthesis. We know everything that it does. It's designed to do what it's meant to do. And then he says in verse 30, if God cares so wonderfully about wildflowers that are here today and thrown into the fire tomorrow, he will certainly care for you. Why do you have so little faith? And then he goes on at the end and he buttons this whole conversation about sparrows and about lilies and what we do with our stress. And he said, look, here's what you need to do. Let's make it simple. Let's make your stress simple. What do you do? He says, seek the kingdom of God above all else and live righteously, and he will give you everything you need. So don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow brings its own worries. Today's trouble is enough for today. This week I was on the phone with my former boss. So before Shayla and I moved here to plant ONE.CHURCH 10 years ago, I worked at a church in Toledo. I was a youth pastor, and my boss is the most amazing guy. We're still like this. Wonderful man to work for. And so I called him up and we were on the phone. And of course, I knew I was going to preach this, so it was top of mind. And so I kind of see it everywhere. But we were on the phone and we were reminiscing on old memories. And I brought up this story of this thing that he and I had to deal with, highly stressful situation about 15 years ago. And he's like, oh, I kind of remember that. Wait, what happened? Now, I remembered it, and I was telling him all the details. And as I told him, he was laughing his head off. He's like, I totally forgot about that, man. He's like, man, I mean, that's been forever. It's 15 years, isn't that long ago. But at that time, the crazy thing is, as I thought about it, at that time, that issue, that situation was overwhelming. It was like consuming. It was the weight of the world on our backs. And I remember like during that time, it was like every single day, it was just this new issue, this new mess that we were going through. If I took what actually happened and turned it into a screenplay, you would think it was fiction, okay? It was crazy. 15 years later, he doesn't even hardly remember it. I have to remind him of it. And I just wonder how many things that we deal with, we stress out. We feel all this tension about some things like here and now that are gonna blow over. And we get worried and anxiety around things that God says, you know what? When you're feeling it, go out and take a look at the birds, get a good look at the flowers, and understand that you are far more valuable than what they are, all right? Stress.